Mixed reactions from local leaders to yesterday's speech from the throne. Shelter House takes steps to deal with an increase in demand. And new developments in the Senate expenses scandal.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Local leaders are weighing in on yesterday's throne speech, and the reaction is mixed.
Prime Minister Stephen Harper laid out his plan for the country for the next 2 years. Now, some liked what they heard. Others believe Northern Ontario was completely forgotten in the plan. Matt Scooby tracked down some of the local politicians to see what they had to say. He files this report.
The throne speech delivered by Governor General David Johnston was almost 3 times as long as the Harper government's first one, but there are concerns about the content of the message, not the length. Mayor Keith Hobbs doesn't share those concerns. He was in Ottawa for the speech and also had a face-to-face meeting with the Prime Minister afterwards, and he's encouraged by what he heard.
He asked about the economy of Thunder Bay. He was well aware of the waterfront project, and I said the economy is booming, however, it needs to boom more, and we need to get the Ring of Fire going, and he understands that. The activity in the north, and he talked about resources and how those resources are going to feed the economy.
Thunder Bay Superior North MP Bruce Heyer is on the other side of the fence. He's disappointed with his speech in general, saying it catered more to big cities and industry. While he's encouraged about the promises of funding for Aboriginal education, Heyer says the lack of concrete action to reform the Senate is embarrassing, especially with the speech being delivered from the Senate chamber floor.
It's not only frustrating, it's ironic. It's interesting to see the tough on crime agenda. He's still beating the tough on crime drum. And so there was lots of tough on crime stuff, but nothing about getting tough on crime in the Senate. There's individual problems in the Senate. There are people who should be in jail, and why aren't they?
Also expressing his disappointment is Ontario Regional Chief Stan Beardy. He says all of the real issues they had hoped would be addressed were absent altogether. Even though education was mentioned, Beardy explains there was no reference to additional resources needed to deal with the problem. He also takes issue with some of the language in the speech.
Some of the terminology that was used there too is that almost insulting, if not insulting, and the fact that Governor General, the Queen's representative, which we have treaty with, to say, well, it's the pioneers that built Canada. It was implied that Canada was empty. There was no acknowledgement that we were here already when the settlers arrived, and that's insulting.
Thunder Bay Rainy River MP John Rafferty also says there was nothing for the region in the speech. He went as far as saying the Harper government is abandoning Northern Ontario. He also calls it unprecedented that Prime Minister Harper was not in the House of Commons to answer questions a day after the speech. Instead, the PM elected to take part in trade talks abroad. Matt Scooby, TBT News.
A high-profile Aboriginal leader is using a controversial word to describe Canada's history with First Nations. Former National Chief Phil Fontaine is calling the past treatment of Aboriginals a genocide. He outlines that view in an article this week in the Globe and Mail. Fontaine says the government allowed mass starvation in the late 19th century and turned a blind eye to tuberculosis outbreaks in the residential schools. He wants the United Nations to recognize those actions as genocide. Ontario Regional Chief Stan Beardy says it's a strong word, but he thinks it's an accurate one.
The word genocide being out there now is that it will create an awareness of the general public. What happened to First Nation people is not just an Indian problem, it's our collective history and the dark history of Canada. And I think it's very important that we deal with it what it is.
Beardy hopes the future holds more discussion on this topic and that there can be some reconciliation. Fontaine will be in Thunder Bay next Friday for an event at Confederation College.
The provincial NDP's infrastructure critic was in Thunder Bay today on what he called a fact-finding mission. Windsor-Tecumseh MPP Percy Hatfield met with the city manager and representatives from NOMA and the CEDC. Hatfield was asked by NDP leader Andrea Horwath to learn more about the infrastructure needs of the region. He says the stalled conversion of the Thunder Bay generating station was a major topic of discussion and frustration. Hatfield says a lot of people are waiting for the province to act, and right now they're disappointed.
It seems to me as a New Democrat that the Wynne government has most of its priorities on the GTA area, and it seems to me that they've forgotten about the North. They speak a lot about it, but they don't do much about it, be it the Northern Ontario Growth Plan, be it some kind of a real plan for the generating station. It just doesn't happen.
The NDP has been hitting the government hard over the stalled coal plant conversion, but Horwath has continued to stop short of saying her party would make it happen if they formed the government.
Cold weather is just around the corner, and that has the shelter house beginning to worry. Officials say they may have to turn people away very soon, as they are already hovering right at capacity. Officials say their building is full with 60 people each night, and that includes their 20 overflow beds. The 15 beds in the alcohol management program are also currently full. Those numbers have Executive Director Patty Haidu feeling concerned. She says throughout the spring they were turning away 8 to 10 people each night, and that number will only continue to rise. Haidu says as temperatures begin to dip, the number of people looking for a warm place to sleep will only get bigger.
We know that they're going to be coming to us looking for some support, and by fire code we're only allowed to have 62 people in this building. So we're very concerned about what's going to happen as the temperatures get colder, and with the vacancy rate as low as it is, the opportunity for more permanent housing is really, really sticky.
Haidu says the shelter house is also looking to work with the city on an emergency cold weather plan. She's examining several solutions and will present them to City Council within the next month.
The manager of a Southside business is concerned that whoever broke their window last night will come back and rob the store. Just after 11 o'clock, somebody tossed a brick through the front window of Tricks Apparel and Accessories on May Street. Now, this was the first time the store had been vandalized, but it comes on the heels of numerous other incidents in that neighborhood. Similar incidents to other businesses were followed up just days later with robberies. Now, while this is the first time Tricks has been vandalized, it's not the first unsettling episode to take place in the store or nearby. Manager Regine Runciman says the neighborhood has deteriorated over the past 2 years.
Like prostitution and fights and a lot of intoxicated people walking the streets and falling asleep in doorways and using our doorways as bathrooms. Intoxicated people in the middle of the afternoon falling on your doorstep and pushing people on the streets and stuff like that.
Runciman says they're taking additional measures to prevent future incidents. They joined with other concerned business owners in the May, Victoria area looking to address the problem. That group will be meeting next week to discuss possible strategies.
The search is on for the driver of a vehicle involved in a collision with a school bus this morning. It happened at about 8 o'clock on Peter Street at Van Norman. Police say a silver Honda Prelude struck the rear of the stopped bus before fleeing the scene. None of the children on board were injured. The suspect vehicle was then located abandoned in an alley a short distance away. Police say there was a spider crack in its windshield, indicating it may have been struck by an unrestrained occupant during the crash. Police say there was a female passenger in the car along with the male driver. They're asking anyone with information on the incident to contact them.
The Dryden Police Service has announced a major change due to budget cuts. The Police Communications Center in Dryden will close its doors next year, with 911 service being contracted out to the town of Owen Sound and their police department. The change will result in the loss of 9 full-time and 4 part-time jobs in Dryden. Police Chief Rob Davis says it was a decision that weighed heavily on the Police Services Board, but one that had to be made in order to save money for the cash-strapped municipality. Salaries for the comm center staff currently total about $700,000 a year. Davis says Owen Sound will charge less than a quarter of that amount to answer 911 calls from Dryden residents. There will also be savings from not having to purchase new equipment. The Communication Center will close March 31st and will leave Dryden Police with about 25 employees, 21 of which are uniformed officers.
A 19-year-old man has been charged following a death on the Fort Severn First Nation. Police were called yesterday to an assault at a residence in the community and found a seriously injured woman. She was transported to the community nursing station where she was pronounced dead. The victim has been identified as 24-year-old Georgina Becky Stoney. Tommy Raymond Miles Jr. remains in custody on a charge of second-degree murder.
And look for details to be released tomorrow on a major crime investigation in the region. Kenora OPP, Dryden Police, Treaty 3 Police, and the Anishinaabeg Police Service have scheduled a joint news conference in Kenora in which information on a lengthy investigation is to be announced. They say the case involves the seizure of significant amounts of drugs, cash, and related property.
A local entrepreneur says she would have struggled a lot longer getting her new restaurant off the ground without the help of a government program. The Blue Door Bistro opened its doors near the Victoriaville in November 2012. Co-owner Holly Napper believed the neighborhood could use a more upscale-style restaurant. Today, MPP Bill Morrow announced the bistro was receiving $76,000 from the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund. Napper says the investment helped to create new jobs and expand upon their original vision.
It has given us new dreams in terms of what we knew we could afford to do and then what we could expand on doing. It gave us, like Shelby said, a cushion to feel comfortable and safe knowing that we would be able to still protect our family and ourselves.
Morrow also announced a $25,000 investment for Bindleweed Farm. Owner Chelsea Rivlin aspires to provide locally grown vegetables for local restaurants and retailers. Morrow says it's good to see the Heritage Fund assisting young people.
The one young lady who referenced how she left a good job and decided to pursue her dream. And I have great respect for entrepreneurship and private sector employers who are risk takers. And it's always nice when you can support them and hopefully see them be successful in the long term.
Morrow believes these investments will create local jobs and further diversify the economy.
If you turn on your television anytime throughout the day and flip through the channels, there's a non-stop variety of talk shows. Now, Confederation College is attempting to follow in their footsteps. Today, students there launched their very own one-hour live show that hopes to educate students on a variety of topics. Courtney Rutherford has that story.
Nancy Freeborn.
It's got all the makings of a hit show. Bright lights, a stage, a vibrant host, and a key element, a live audience. Confederation College's Student Union launched their talk show series titled Let's Talk About. Each show features a wide variety of discussions and musical performances. Christine Kleist is one of the show organizers. She says the hour-long episode aims to engage students and the community on a wide variety of topics that are not only difficult to discuss, but are challenging and taboo subjects.
Just that people feel satisfied with knowing that they just learned something as well as they are able to relate to it, because it is all about the students and making sure they have a safe but fun time here at college.
Clay said it took a lengthy process to find someone who could host the show. They were looking for someone who was not only charismatic, but someone that was comfortable talking about certain subjects. After meeting Nancy Freeborn, they decided she was the perfect fit.
I was a panelist last year, and they just asked me questions, and I had to say raunchy things. And so this year they asked me to host, and I obliged because it's something that people need to know about. We need to educate in an entertaining way.
The talk show runs once per month, and each show will be broadcast via video conference to the college's regional campuses and recorded for the web. Courtney Rutherford, TBT News.
Every year, a relatively small group of Canadians travel the country supporting the fight against cancer. The National Inside Ride Tour is an event where teams of 6 get together, taking turns riding stationary bicycles. Each participant rides for 5 minutes, and the teams compete for medals in a variety of categories, such as Best Spirit and Furthest Distance. All fundraising is done prior to the event, which started 7 years ago, but has only been on the road for 3. Event manager Jen Davies spoke about how much these events benefit cancer.